The city was alive with lights and noise. Tall towers stretched into the night sky, glowing like silver spears. Vehicles floated along the airways above, their hum mixing with the voices of thousands of people walking the crowded streets below. The marketplace was the heart of the city. Merchants shouted, selling food, clothes, and machines from shining stalls. The smell of roasted bread and strange spices drifted through the air. But in the shadow of one stone arch, away from the bright stalls, sat a lonely figure. She was not human. Her skin carried a pale silver glow, soft like moonlight, and her hair was thin and white as frost. Her eyes were large, deep blue, filled with sadness. Her clothes were torn and dirty, clearly from long days of wandering. She sat curled against the cold wall, hugging herself, watching people walk past. Her name was Lyra, though nobody here cared enough to ask. She had no home, no family, and no place in this great human city. She had once lived on a green planet far away, but that planet was gone. Lost to war. All that remained was her memory and the ache in her chest. Humans walked by quickly, some glancing at her with cold eyes, others ignoring her completely. She did not beg. She did not speak. She only watched, her stomach aching from hunger, her body trembling from the cool night air. It was then that Darren saw her. Darren was not like most men in the market. He was tall, dressed in fine clothes of dark blue fabric, with a coat that looked soft but strong. His shoes shone with polish, and a small silver ring on his hand caught the light as he moved. Many people knew his name. He was a man of wealth, owner of ships and buildings. To others, he had everything, money, respect, and power. Yet behind his calm face, Darren carried a quiet emptiness. He had riches, but not warmth. He had a house, but not a home. As he walked past the marketplace arch, his eyes fell on the fragile figure sitting against the wall. He slowed. Others had ignored her, but Darren did not. Something in her silence pulled at him. She looked like someone who had lost everything, someone who had been forgotten by the world. He stepped closer. Lyra noticed his shadow fall across her. She raised her head, expecting another cruel word or another cold stare. But instead, she found his eyes fixed on her, not in disgust, but in quiet thought. "Are you alone here?" he asked gently. His voice surprised her. Most people passed without a sound. She nodded slowly, unsure if answering him was safe. He studied her clothes, her face, her trembling hands. "You have no food." She shook her head. Her throat felt dry, but she forced out a whisper. "No home." Darren stood still for a moment. He could have turned away, like the rest. He could have given her a coin and walked on. But something inside him refused. For years he had bought what he wanted, built what he desired, but here, in front of him, was something money could not measure: loneliness. Without another word, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small pack of bread. He held it out to her. She stared at it, hesitant. Slowly, she reached and took it with shaking fingers. She bit into it carefully, as though afraid it might be taken back. As she ate, Darren crouched down to meet her eyes. "What is your name?" Her lips moved quietly. "Lyra." "Lyra," he repeated, as though testing the sound. "My name is Darren." For a long moment, they said nothing more. Around them, the market continued, voices shouting, machines buzzing, but it felt far away. Darren looked at her once more, his thoughts heavy. He had lived surrounded by walls of wealth, but he had never seen someone look so fragile, so close to breaking. Something stirred inside him, a feeling he had not known in years. "You should not be here like this," he said softly. "Not alone." Lyra lowered her eyes. "I have nowhere else." Her words cut deep into him. He felt an ache, not for himself, but for her. She was a stranger, an alien from a destroyed world, yet in her voice he heard the same emptiness that had haunted him in silence. That night, Darren made a decision. A decision that would change both of their lives. The night was heavy with rain. Drops of water slid down from the sky, striking the stone streets and filling the air with a soft rhythm. The marketplace that had been full of sound and light earlier was now almost empty. Most stalls had closed, their bright signs turned off, leaving only the dim glow of street lamps. Darren walked slowly through the wet streets, his long coat shielding him from the rain. But his thoughts were not on the weather. His mind stayed on the silver-skinned girl he had seen earlier, Lyra. The image of her sitting alone under the arch would not leave him. He had met many people in his life, business partners, leaders, and workers. Yet no one's face had stayed with him like hers. When he reached the arch again, he saw her still there, curled tightly against the cold stone, her thin clothes damp from the rain. She did not complain, she did not cry, she simply endured. Something in her silence touched him more than words ever could. He stepped closer. "You should not stay here in the rain," he said. Lyra opened her tired eyes and looked up at him. She had expected him to be gone, like everyone else who walked past her life. Yet here he was again, speaking softly to her. She did not know why. Humans had been unkind to her since she had arrived in the city. They called her strange, treated her as if she did not belong. But this man was different. "I have nowhere else," she whispered. Her voice was almost lost in the sound of the falling rain. Darren stood in silence. He could not understand why this small, fragile girl moved him so deeply. He had lived in luxury for years, surrounded by endless comfort. Yet when he saw her shivering in the cold, he felt his wealth meant nothing. His heart, which had long been silent, now spoke clearly. He bent down so his eyes were level with hers. Rain slid across his hair, but he did not care. "Lyra," he said firmly, "I need a woman, and you need a home." Her eyes widened. She stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. The words sounded strange to her ears. Humans often spoke in ways she did not understand, but his tone was clear. It was not a command, not a trick. It was an offer, a bridge between two broken lives. "You need," she asked softly, unsure of his meaning. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. His voice was steady, honest. "I have walls, but they are empty. I have wealth, but it gives me no peace. I need someone not to serve me, not to obey me, but to live beside me. And you," he paused, his gaze steady. "You need warmth. You need safety. You need a place where you belong. Come with me." Lyra's hands trembled. She had never expected kindness from a human, not like this. For so long, she had been treated as nothing, a shadow at the edge of streets. Could she trust him? Or was this another cruel trick that would leave her hurt once again? Her heart beat fast. She looked into his eyes. They were not hard like the others she had seen. They carried something else, loneliness, perhaps even pain. He was wealthy, yet his gaze was the same as hers. Empty. Searching. "You don't know me," she said quietly, still uncertain. Darren nodded. "No. But I want to. And I want you to know me. That is enough to begin." For a long moment, only the rain spoke between them. Lyra hugged her knees, her thoughts heavy. If she stayed, she would remain in the shadows, cold and forgotten. If she went with him, perhaps she would face new risks, but perhaps she would also find something she had long lost, hope. Slowly, she rose to her feet. Her body was weak from hunger, and her clothes clung to her from the rain, but her voice held a quiet strength. "If I go with you, will I be safe?" Darren looked at her with steady eyes. "With me, yes. I promise." The word promise was unfamiliar to her. Her people had not spoken it often, but she felt its weight in the way he said it. Finally, she gave a small nod. Darren reached out his hand. For a second, Lyra hesitated, then placed her thin fingers in his. His hand was warm against hers, strong but gentle. Together, they stepped out of the shadow of the arch and into the rain-washed street. As they walked, Lyra glanced at the tall towers glowing in the distance. For the first time since leaving her destroyed world, she felt a small spark inside her chest. Not trust, not yet. But something close to it. And for Darren, walking with her at his side, the emptiness in his heart began to soften. That night, under the rain and lights of the city, a bond was formed, one not of wealth or need alone, but of two broken souls choosing to walk together. The rain softened as Darren led Lyra through the wide streets. Lights from tall towers reflected on the wet ground, making the city look like a mirror of stars. Lyra kept her eyes low, clutching his hand lightly. Each step felt uncertain. She had followed no one before, trusted no one before. Yet something about this man's steady presence gave her courage to keep walking. At last, they reached a large gate. Beyond it stood a great house, tall and strong, its walls smooth and white, its windows glowing with warm light. Compared to the cold marketplace, it looked like another world. Lyra stopped, staring with wide eyes. "This is your home," she whispered. "Yes," Darren replied simply. He touched the gate, and it opened with a soft sound. "And now it is your shelter too." She followed him inside. The path was lined with small trees, their leaves shaking with rain. The house itself rose like a fortress, but instead of feeling cold, it seemed alive. Soft yellow light spilled from the windows, welcoming her. When the door opened, warmth touched her skin. The inside was bright, filled with gentle lamps and smooth floors that shone. A quiet hum of machines filled the air, cleaning devices, cooking devices, and others she did not recognize. To Lyra, it was overwhelming. She had lived in broken shelters, under stone arches, and in empty corners of streets. This place felt far too grand for her. Her first step onto the polished floor made her hesitate. "I cannot stay here," she said softly. "It is too much." Darren turned to her, his voice calm. "It is not too much. It is empty without you." She looked at him, uncertain how to reply. His words carried a weight she did not fully understand. But his eyes told her he meant them. He guided her further inside. The wide hall was lined with art on the walls, paintings of oceans, forests, and stars. The smell of fresh bread drifted from the dining room. The machines worked silently, preparing food without command. Darren stopped at a large door and opened it. Inside was a room with a soft bed covered in white sheets, a small table, and a window looking out at the garden. The room was simple compared to the rest of the house, yet still grand to her eyes. "This will be your room," he said. "Your place." Lyra stepped forward slowly. She touched the blanket with her hand, surprised by its softness. She pressed her fingers into it and pulled them back quickly, almost afraid it would disappear. Never in her life had she rested on something so gentle. She turned to him, her voice quiet. "This is for me." "Yes. For you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to say more, but no words came. Darren watched her closely. He noticed the way she moved with care, as though afraid she might break something. He noticed her eyes shining faintly in the warm light. He felt something stir again inside him, the same feeling he had felt when he first saw her. "Sit," he said softly. "You are safe here." She nodded and sat slowly on the bed, her body sinking into the soft surface. A small sound escaped her lips, half surprise, half relief. For the first time in many years, she felt comfort against her body. Darren left the room briefly and returned with a tray of food, bread, fruits, and warm soup. He placed it on the table and said, "Eat." Lyra hesitated. The smell was rich, the sight beautiful, but she did not know how to use the silver utensils. She looked at them, confused. Seeing her struggle, Darren sat across from her. He picked up a spoon and showed her gently how to hold it. Then he dipped it into the soup and lifted it to his lips. Like this. She copied his movements, clumsy at first, but soon managed. The warmth of the soup spread through her, calming her hunger. She ate slowly, carefully, and Darren did not rush her. He simply watched, silent but present. When she finished, she leaned back slightly, her face softer than before. For the first time, she did not feel hunger. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. "Thank you," she whispered. Darren gave a small nod. "You do not need to thank me. I meant what I said. You need a home. And I need someone to fill the silence here." Her eyes lowered. She thought about his words. He was wealthy, surrounded by all things people desired. Yet he spoke as if he had nothing. She did not fully understand yet, but she could see the loneliness hidden in his calm face. That night, as the rain faded and the city outside grew quiet, Lyra lay on the soft bed. She stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep at first. The silence felt strange, too gentle compared to the rough noises of the streets. Yet slowly, her eyes closed, her body sinking into rest. And for the first time since leaving her broken world, she slept without fear. In another room, Darren stood by the window, watching the lights of the city. He felt the emptiness inside him begin to change. The house no longer felt like a prison of wealth. It felt alive. It felt warmer. He whispered to himself, almost as if to confirm it, "She belongs here now." And in that moment, the walls of his house were no longer empty. Morning sunlight spilled gently through the tall windows of the house. The rain had passed, leaving the sky clear and bright. In the garden outside, drops of water still clung to the leaves, sparkling like small jewels. Birds circled above the roof, their calls soft against the silence of the great home. Lyra awoke slowly. For a moment, she did not know where she was. The softness of the bed, the quiet hum of machines, and the warmth of the blanket confused her. Then she remembered the man named Darren, the house, the promise. She sat up, her silver hair falling around her face. For the first time in many years, her body did not ache from sleeping on hard stone. She touched the blanket with her hand, almost to make sure it was real. A faint smile touched her lips before fading again. Her heart was still heavy with memories she tried to push away. A soft knock came at the door. "May I come in?" Darren's voice was calm. "Yes," she said quietly. He entered carrying a tray with bread, fruit, and warm tea. He placed it on the small table near her bed. "You should eat," he said simply. Lyra nodded. She sat and began to eat slowly, still not used to the silver utensils but better than the night before. Darren sat across from her, watching in silence for a while. He did not speak until she had finished. When the last piece of fruit was gone, she folded her hands in her lap. Darren noticed her eyes shift away, as if hiding something deep inside. "You carry pain," he said gently. "I can see it." Lyra froze. Her blue eyes lowered to the floor. "It is not easy to speak." "You do not need to," Darren replied. "Not unless you want to. But know this, I will listen." His words lingered in the air. For a long time, Lyra said nothing. She pressed her fingers together, her chest tight. Part of her wanted to remain silent. What use was it to tell her story? No one had cared before. No one had listened. Yet another part of her, the part that remembered his steady eyes, wanted to believe him. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and trembling. "My world was called Orin," she began. "It was green, with wide fields and shining rivers. My people lived in small villages. We sang songs under the stars at night. We shared everything: food, work, life. I was happy there. Her lips shook as she paused. Darren waited quietly. Then, the war came. Not our war. We were caught between two great powers fighting for land and stars. Our planet was small, but it stood in their path. They fought above us, and the sky burned. Fire fell on our homes. The rivers turned black. The fields turned to ash. My family, her voice broke. She pressed her hand to her mouth. They were gone in a single day. Her eyes filled with tears, but she forced herself to continue. I ran. Along with a few others. We tried to escape, but most did not survive. I found ships, traders, strangers. I gave whatever I could for a seat, and I was left alone in strange places. I thought Earth would be different. I thought humans would show kindness. She looked up at him then, her tears shining like glass. But no one wanted me. I was nothing. Only you stopped. Only you saw me. Her voice fell silent. The room was still, the only sound the faint hum of the machines. Darren's chest tightened as he listened. He had known loss in his own way: his parents gone too soon, his life built on wealth but not love. Yet her pain was deeper, heavier. To lose an entire world, an entire family, was something he could barely imagine. He leaned forward, his voice steady. You are not nothing, Lyra. You are strong. You survived what others could not. That is not nothing. That is everything. She looked at him, surprised by his words. She had never heard them spoken to her before. He continued, you carry the memory of your people. As long as you live, they are not fully gone. Lyra's tears fell freely now, but they were no longer only tears of sorrow. There was something else inside them: relief. Relief that someone had finally listened, that someone had finally cared enough to hear her truth. Why do you care? She whispered. You are rich. You could live without me. Why do you care for a broken girl from a broken world? Darren's answer came quietly, but firmly. Because I am broken too. My wealth cannot heal me. My house cannot fill the emptiness. But you, your presence, your story gives meaning to my silence. You give me something I did not know I needed. Lyra's breath caught. She had thought she was the only one carrying emptiness. Now she saw it in him too, hidden behind walls of stone and glass. For the first time, she felt a connection, not forced, not demanded, but real. Two lonely souls, each carrying their scars, now sharing them. She wiped her tears and whispered, "Thank you, Darren." He gave a small nod. "Thank you, Lyra." Outside the window, sunlight grew brighter, falling across the garden. Inside the room, a fragile trust had begun to grow. And for both of them, the heavy silence of the past no longer felt so heavy. Days turned into weeks. Lyra slowly grew used to living inside Darren's house. At first, every small thing surprised her: the sound of the machines that cleaned the floors, the warmth of the lamps that never faded, the taste of food that never spoiled. She learned to eat with human utensils, she learned to walk freely in the hallways without fear, and sometimes she even dared to smile when the garden flowers opened under the sunlight. But outside the walls of the house, the world was not so kind. People had begun to whisper. Darren's name was well known in the city, and his wealth made others watch him closely. When they saw the silver-skinned alien girl at his side, their eyes narrowed. Some muttered in the streets, others spoke behind closed doors. "Why does a man of such power waste his time on a strange girl from the stars?" they said. "She is not one of us. She does not belong here." Darren heard the whispers through his business partners. Some came to him directly. One evening, a man in a gray suit sat across from him at a table and spoke plainly. "You are respected, Darren. You are admired. But people are asking questions. This alien girl, she lowers your standing. If you keep her in your house, you risk your name. Let her go. It is better for you." Darren's face stayed calm, but his voice was firm. "I will not let her go. She is under my care, and she belongs in my home. If my name is lowered because I choose compassion, then so be it." The man frowned. "Compassion is not currency. It will not protect you." "No," Darren replied, "but it will protect my soul." The man left, displeased. Lyra, however, had heard some of the whispers herself. When she walked beside Darren in the city streets, she felt the stares. When she went into the marketplace with him, she caught the murmurs. The words were sharp, and though she did not always understand them, she felt their coldness. One night, when the moon was high, she sat by the window in her room, her knees pulled close to her chest. When Darren entered, he found her quiet, her eyes distant. "What troubles you?" he asked. "They do not want me here," she whispered. "The people. They look at me as if I am wrong. You should not keep me. They will harm you because of me." Darren shook his head. "Listen to me, Lyra. I brought you here because I chose to. I do not care for their whispers. This is your home now. Do not let them steal your peace." Her lips trembled. "But I am afraid. What if someone tries to hurt us?" His eyes softened, but his voice was steady. "Then I will protect you. Always." She wanted to believe him, but fear still lingered in her heart. That fear soon became real. One evening, while the house grew quiet and the machines hummed gently, the front doors were forced open. Shadows moved across the hall. A group of men, their faces hidden, stormed inside. Their voices were sharp with anger. "Where is she?" one of them shouted. "The alien girl. She does not belong here." Lyra, who had been in the dining room, froze in terror. Her body shook, her breath caught. She had lived through war before, but the hatred in these men's voices brought back every nightmare. Before she could move, Darren appeared between her and the intruders. His figure stood tall, his eyes burning with quiet fire. "You will not touch her," he said firmly. One of the men laughed cruelly. "You protect her? You risk your wealth, your name, for this worthless creature." Darren stepped forward. "She is not worthless. She is more human than any of you who would speak with such hatred." The intruders hesitated. They had expected weakness, but they found strength. Darren was not a man who bent to fear. His voice carried power, not from wealth, but from truth. "Leave my house," he ordered. "If you return, you will face the law. She is under my protection, and I will not break my word." The men glared, but something in his eyes made them falter. One by one, they backed away, muttering curses, until at last they were gone. The heavy doors closed behind them. Lyra sat trembling, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Darren turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you hurt?" he asked quickly. She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "No. But, you stood for me. You did not let them take me." He knelt before her, his voice low and steady. "I gave you my promise, Lyra. I will never let harm come to you. Not while I breathe." Her tears fell, but this time they were not only from fear. They carried relief, gratitude, and a new kind of strength. For the first time, she believed fully that his words were not empty. He had proven them with his actions. That night, as the stars shone outside the tall windows, Lyra whispered softly to herself, "Maybe humans are not all cruel." And for Darren, watching her calm at last, the bond between them grew stronger. The world outside might judge, but within these walls, trust had been born. In the mornings, Lyra walked through the garden, her silver hair glowing softly in the sunlight. At first, she had only admired the flowers planted by machines, but soon she began to make small changes. She knelt in the soil, her hands digging gently, and placed strange little seeds she had kept hidden in her small pouch. They were the last gift from her destroyed world. At first, Darren thought nothing would grow. The soil of Earth was different from the soil of Orion, her home planet. But after a few days, thin green shoots appeared. Lyra smiled as she touched them carefully, humming a low tune under her breath. The tune was not in human language, but it was soft and full of life. Darren watched from the balcony, his heart steady with quiet wonder. He had built this house with stone, machines, and wealth, but Lyra had brought something he could not buy: life. Inside the house, Lyra also began to change things. She found empty corners and decorated them with small patterns from her culture, drawn with colored chalk she borrowed from the market. She sang her alien songs in the evenings, and though Darren could not understand the words, he felt peace in the sound. In return, Darren began to teach her the ways of humans. He showed her how to read their letters, how to use their tools, and how to move through the city without fear. Sometimes they walked together in the busy streets, and though people still stared, Lyra did not look down anymore. She kept her head higher, knowing Darren was beside her. One evening, as the sun set in gold and red, Darren found her in the garden again, sitting among her small plants. She was humming softly, her hands brushing over the new leaves. "You have made this place beautiful," Darren said as he stepped closer. She looked up at him with a gentle smile. "I only planted seeds. The earth did the rest." "No," he replied. "You gave them care. That is what made them grow. The house feels alive now, because of you." Her smile widened, but her voice stayed quiet. "I only wished to bring a piece of my world here. So I do not forget." He nodded. "And now it is part of mine too." They sat together in silence for a while, watching the sky darken and the stars appear. For Lyra, the stars were both comfort and pain. They reminded her of home, but also of loss. Yet now, sitting with Darren, they also reminded her that life could begin again. Inside the house, their lives blended more with each passing day. Lyra learned to cook using human tools, though sometimes she laughed when her food came out strange. Darren ate it anyway, never complaining, and she found joy in his quiet patience. One night, after sharing a simple meal she had prepared, Lyra asked softly, "Why do you always eat what I make, even if it is not good?" Darren looked at her and smiled faintly. "Because it is made with care. That makes it good, no matter the taste." Her heart warmed at his words. She had spent so long feeling unwanted, and now she was learning what it meant to be valued. But it was not only Lyra who changed. Darren also began to feel different. For years, his life had been full of numbers, deals, and wealth. Each day had been predictable, empty, and cold. Now, when he walked into the halls and heard her singing, or when he sat in the garden and saw her plants grow, he felt something new: peace. One evening, while he worked in his study, Lyra entered quietly carrying a small lamp she had decorated with alien patterns. She placed it on his desk. "This is for you," she said shyly. Darren looked at the lamp. The soft light shone through the designs she had drawn, casting gentle shapes on the walls. He lifted his eyes to her and said, "It is beautiful." "Thank you." She lowered her gaze, her cheeks warming. "I only wished to give you something, the way you gave me everything." Darren stood and placed a hand gently over hers. "You have given me more than you know, Lyra. You gave me meaning." Her chest tightened, but this time not with sorrow. With hope. That night, as she sang one of her alien songs by the window, Darren joined her quietly, humming along even though he did not know the tune. Their voices, different yet in harmony, filled the house with warmth no machine could ever create. By then, the whispers of the outside world still existed, but they no longer held power. The house was no longer empty stone and glass, it was alive with laughter, song, and the quiet bond between two souls who had found each other. Together, they were building something neither of them had known before, a shared life. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks slowly became months. By now, the house was not only full of light but also full of small signs of a new life. In the garden, Lyra's alien plants grew tall, their leaves spreading wide and shining faintly under the moonlight. The walls inside the house carried patterns of two worlds, human designs and alien art living side by side. One morning, Darren stood by the window, watching Lyra as she moved through the garden. She touched each plant carefully, checking the soil, humming her soft song. He realized then that she had given his home something far beyond beauty. She had given it a soul. But still, there was a question resting in his heart. For all the peace they had built together, he wondered if she truly wished to stay. That evening, when the stars appeared in the sky, Darren asked her gently, "Lyra, are you happy here?" She looked up from the plants and thought for a moment. Her eyes reflected the starlight, and her voice was quiet but firm. "When I first came here, I was afraid. I thought I was only a burden. But now," she placed a hand over her chest. "Now I feel I belong. I have a place. I have someone who sees me." Darren's heart tightened at her words. For so long, his life had been empty, even though he had wealth and power. Now, standing before this once homeless alien girl, he realized he had found something he could never buy: companionship. But the world outside their home was not silent. Whispers spread through the city. People spoke of the rich human who lived with an alien girl. Some were curious, some were kind, but many were cruel. Yet Darren did not hide. He walked beside her in the streets, his head high, and each time someone whispered, Lyra grew stronger. One day, as they returned from the market, Lyra paused near the city square. A group of children were staring at her plants in a small basket she carried. Their eyes were wide with wonder. "What are these?" one child asked. Lyra knelt down and smiled softly. "They are from a world far away. They grow when you care for them." The children reached out, touching the leaves with fascination. For the first time, Lyra felt not like a stranger, but like a bridge between worlds. Darren watched her from a distance, his chest filling with quiet pride. That night, when they returned home, Darren said, "Do you see, Lyra? You are not only part of this house. You are becoming part of this world." Her eyes softened. "I only wish to share what I have left. If they see beauty in it, then perhaps my world is not fully gone." In the days that followed, she began to plant more seeds in the city gardens, teaching children and families how to care for them. Slowly, people stopped looking at her with fear and started looking with curiosity and respect. Inside their home, the bond between her and Darren grew deeper. They no longer needed many words. A glance, a smile, a quiet song was enough to speak of the trust they had built. One evening, as rain fell softly outside, Darren sat with Lyra near the fire. The warmth flickered across her face, and he saw in her eyes something he had not seen before: peace. "Lyra," he said carefully, "I want to ask you something." She tilted her head, waiting. "I gave you this home because you needed shelter," he continued. "But now, I don't just want you to live here. I want you to live here with me, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as my partner in life. Will you stay with me, not because you need a home, but because you choose to?" For a long moment, the only sound was the rain against the windows. Lyra looked into his eyes, her chest trembling with emotion. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "I will stay," she whispered. "Because I choose you. Because here, with you, I have found not only a home, but also my heart. Darren's eyes softened, and he reached out, holding her hands in his. In that quiet moment, the walls of the grand house felt smaller, warmer, alive with a love that no wealth could ever replace. From then on, their lives were no longer just about survival. They were about building a future together. A human and an alien, two souls from different worlds who had chosen each other. The city slowly came to accept their bond. Some still doubted, but others began to admire. They saw how the alien girl, once homeless and lost, now brought life not only to a man's house but to the hearts of many. And they saw how the wealthy man, once cold and distant, now walked through the streets with warmth in his eyes and kindness in his voice. In the garden, under the same stars that once made Lyra feel alone, two voices often rose together, hers in alien song, his in quiet harmony. The house that had once stood silent was now a place of music, laughter, and hope. Together, they had chosen a shared life. Together, they had built a home not of stone, but of trust. And together, they walked into the future side by side.